Hello. It is Wednesday, 7:30, and we are DebateSensei. I am Jared Topeka Miller, Communications Professor and Debate Coach. This is Tim Seavey from Bizolutions.
Hey.
All right, when we got Matt Shapiro, JD.
Hello, everybody.
All right, excellent. And so today, we're going to be talking about online debate. And considering the situation that we're in, I've been spending like all day working on this online tournament that we're hosting, and we didn't get to do our debate, but I think that we're gonna get one set up, and I think it's a really good topic to discuss because there's been a lot of mixed reaction because a lot of people are forced into online debating.
Yeah, I think
students have given me some feedback, and I want to know if you've gotten any other feedback.
I think we can almost separate it into like. I wrote down a couple things for today, and like they're kind of grouped between, the unique situation that this pandemic presents and the uses for online debate in that context, and then the second would just be, where does online debate fit, if anywhere, in regular, as we knew it the world before, in that context. So, and I think hopefully today we'll kind of explore both of those things. What do you think, Tim?
I think under weird circumstances, right, when we're pressured into this, like there are no tournaments, there are no in-person practices, there is no possibility that you can all get in a room to do the thing. I think that it's been pretty impressive how the entire country has adapted. Like there are East Coast, West Coast, Midwest nationals, like tournaments happening all over left and right. It seems to be that most of them are synchronous, right? Like they're happening with live debate. And there are some major obstacles that come into that maybe we can talk about. But I've been pretty impressed by just how resilient, I guess, the community is in their ability to just pick stuff up. And there's some new challenges, right? So this past weekend was the Cool Off, at least in Southern California. And the Cool Off is this like staple tournament. I don't know, it's probably its 30th plus year at this point. That's for new debaters. But you still end up with this issue of speed once people start getting, quicker as debate goes. And when you have a live streamed, communication back and forth, microphones can only pick up so much so fast, and video only picks up so much so fast. And there's a much lower ceiling at that point to how fast debaters can go.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons we weren't able to get the asynchronous tournament out, because it was just like the timeline that you needed. I just thought it'd been a little bit much, but it's looking like we're going to have limited sort of contact even next year, and
Yeah.
So I think that next year would be a good time for an asynchronous tournament. Now, there's been a bunch of synchronous. I did Climb the Mountain with Jim Hansen up in Washington, and that seemed to go well. My students did that, and one of my coaches, and they did pretty well in that one. But one of the pieces of feedback I got from my students was that there's still a pretty good disparity between the service that people get for their internet.
Yes.
And
Right.
so that's really kind of like when you're doing synchronous, like as far as synchronous tournaments go, they're like that. We're not there yet, and so that's why one of the reasons I like the asynchronous stuff a whole lot.
Yeah, I want to always take these opportunities to kind of talk about what Jared is discussing for any of you who might not know exactly what we mean when we say asynchronous or synchronous at this point. So a synchronous tournament, we are talking about an online synchronous debate tournament. We're talking about one that you would imagine that would follow the exact same format of a traditional, in-person at a school debate tournament. And with the challenges which that create, and the biggest challenge that we're talking about is the disparity in internet connection specifically. And what happens is, even as we have this live stream right now, we're all depending on each other's internet access.
And it always works. We've had people drop out in the middle of these things.
Yeah,
before.
Exactly. And so these types of, complete technical failures are they really hinder the debate, right? I mean, that's just not something that happens generally. So when we talk about asynchronous tournaments, one we're planning on having and what we're hoping to cultivate in the community generally is a tournament where you do end up recording videos, but you record them directly to a phone or a computer, with no need for the internet except to upload files. And asynchronous means that it's not at the same time. And so it's not like I am presenting straight to Jared or Tim and they're going to refute it in that immediate second. There is actually days that can go by between my speech being uploaded, they watch it, they can actually develop a response much more, they can refute arguments directly if they choose to do extra research in that time.
Yeah.
And present a uploaded file which is uninterrupted. That is the key difference. And so as far as the internet technical problem, how does that solve that problem? That's the kind of why we're trying to foster that in this community. It's not really a thing just yet, but hopefully we can kind of pull it together, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, we just didn't really have quite the runway, and I didn't want, like, to I don't know, my plate was full.
Don't want to force it. Yeah, we don't want to mess it up.
You know what I mean? Like, but the really awesome thing about asynchronous tournaments is that, like, the stages that they go in, right?
Yeah.
The best thing to do is that you go in different stages. And so, like, week one would just be the affirmative stage. If everyone has the same topic, they submit, like, 3 affirmatives, and that gets paired up with somebody else, and they watch it, and then we move on to the cross-examination phase. Yeah. Where everyone is, doing cross-examination. So
it also allows for like higher quality video, like you're able to kind of, you can record a much better video without the need for streaming. Even the service StreamYard kind of reduces our resolution to a certain amount, right? Like with you, if you have access to just any recording software, you likely can record a much higher quality video. So there are perks to the asynchronous style if we can, get it down and do it right. These are technical things, you know what I mean? Go ahead, Tim.
I think the biggest advantage to asynchronous is the lack of communication apprehension. So just removing from the picture entirely the anxiety that comes with someone just gave a speech, I was rapidly taking notes and planning my rebuttals, and now I've got to speak. I think that's a really big bar to cover or to clear for new debaters.
Yeah.
I mean, even people that have been doing it for a while can find a huge advantage in like functionally infinite prep time. Like the fact that you can go real deep and get every, answer well cleaned out, like every speech can be economical in how you set it up because you've got time to write a really, well put together speech and research well put together.
Hopefully it raises that bar too.
It really goes up. So yeah, it's difficult because it takes much longer, obviously, but I think that it really brings another level of quality to a round.
Agreed. Yeah, and hopefully it raises the bar. Like if you have that extra time, then the bar is higher. You know what I mean? I was gonna say, like one thing that kind of transcends the pandemic context that I kind of wanted to bring up at some point. I'll just do it now. In the future, in a world where like you could record at your school, for instance, right? Like maybe even sitting next to a partner, like you two could be in a room together. One thing I noticed that a lot of people kind of have a hard time with, which is like the background. Like, where are you in these contexts, right? You put a suit on and in your kitchen, and you see your cat walking around. Like, it's cool first of all, and right now because it gives us some alternative. Like, at that point, it's like I'd rather that. I mean, what's the formality of a classroom anyway? It's as good a place as anywhere, right? But I like how in the future I kind of envision, every squad room to have kind of like their little essentially a recording studio. And like when you want to film, if you wanted to go hit Harvard tomorrow and you're at SEC and you're in the middle of Orange County, maybe you could facilitate that debate in a very professional way using your school's facilities, representing your school. And that type of remote access, finances is the biggest thing. Many coaches, many teams know exactly what I'm talking about, where that is the real limiting factor, right? So if you can have access to big tournaments with big name schools, that would be cool because it kind of levels the playing field in certain areas like an online tournament. And hopefully someday we can increase the number of debates happening with these types of institutions.
So Tim, have you had any students that have done online debate tournaments since the pandemic?
Specifically, I've had students that did both. They did synchronous and asynchronous tournaments and had some real interesting pros and cons. Funny enough, actually, the final round of the cool off, the most recent tournament, the topic was whether traditional classrooms or adapted online learning was preferable. So it wasn't a clean fit, but I just thought that it was pretty like beautifully meta that you had these debaters in a synchronous but remote setting debating that. But I think there were a lot of real challenges as well as benefits that came to it. So, for example, limited prep in every tournament, that's like the challenge to limited prep is that you have no time, right? You've got 2 minutes in the case of impromptu or 30 minutes in the case of extemp. But as soon as, for our tournament at least, someone gets 24 hours, the number of people willing to come to the plate increased. And at least from everything that we've seen in the back end of the tournament, I think the quality was better too because you got several takes at it. So there just are fewer flubs. You can really plan out your points. And I know that that's not the point. Like, there is still absolutely value to a real off-the-cuff speech. But I think that it's really interesting, the new value that's added to an asynchronous model that way. Where synchronous, I think there were some real challenges. Like, one of our debaters won a round because his competitor's internet glitched out and they couldn't repair it. Like, that sucks.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
There you go.
You got it, but like, like that's a bummer. That shouldn't happen in, an actual round. So I like the stability that asynchronous affords as an alternative for things like that.
If I want to jump in right here, I mean, one thing I want to make very clear, I know all of us agree on, is like none of us think that an online debate will ever, usurp debate, right? Like, no one's saying that this is the only way it should be.
No.
And it's really more of like, do you want to look at some developing some of these other skills as well? And like, I'm of the opinion where like we should encourage all sorts of learning, and even if it's not exactly what you kind of thought debate was, like, don't get turned off to the idea that this is kind of something we adopt into our community, not dominate. Just like, as soon as we can get back to business as usual, we're going to be back at schools competing. But this format, I do believe, develops skills in students that transcend debate. I mean, in law right now, for instance, long before the coronavirus, there were already electronic, means of communications to develop, to do things professionally. And so as job interviews increase using this type of stuff, as you increase using this in your work life and your employment and meetings, like, these are skills that you learn in debate, just like all kinds of other skills you learn in debate, which transcend debate. And those are things that you may take with you long after, you're done competing or judging or coaching, whatever it may be. So
yeah, I think one of the awesome parts about the online environment is how it starts teasing out the central parts of debate and kind of contrasting what isn't central. Like, the ability to come up with an answer within 10 seconds, while impressive, you know what I mean? Like, it's not absolutely necessary, like in a particular, like as far as life skills are concerned, while that might be useful in a whole lot of circumstances, the ability to come up with something within 24 hours is still pretty darn good. You know what I mean? It's like,
definitely.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And so, like, that sort of, like, they still sounded like impromptus, you know what I mean? They still had that sort of personality, off the cuff, last minute type of thing that you're used to. But for debates, like especially asynchronous debates, like the limited amount of prep time is a result of trying to have tournaments on the weekends, not a result of better debates. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like, what would make this better is if we limited the time. It's like, no, like that's logistics. That's not like a central part of the philosophy of debate. And so when you don't have that requirement, like an asynchronous debate, I think like it starts exposing some of the things that work central.
And that's where it's like, do you want to turn yourself off to this other, like it requires old dogs to learn some new tricks. I mean, that's the truth. Like, it's not exactly what you've always known. Of course. I mean, that's that. And technical difficulties like internet speeds and stuff like that are now something you have to account for. And like, on one hand, like, I like debate exactly how it is, and I don't necessarily wish that it just would change fundamentally in any horrible way. But like, I'm not scared, at least, of encumbering some of this new knowledge that I'll have to make, right, to kind of make this type of debate happen, because it's just inevitably going to be here. And it's not only, it's a resource for competition, it's a resource for, practice, it's a resource for just increasing the number of debates you do in a year or whatever time frame you're working with. So,
right.
I don't know. So go ahead, Tim.
I think to that point, right? Like, so you made a point a second ago saying teams eventually may have their corner that is where they do recording.
Yeah.
I think in terms of developing new skills,
Yeah.
that's, I think, really valuable. And some teams have been adopting that for a while. So, I mean, talking about old dogs and new tricks, Jared, you've been doing video with your team for debate as well as speech events for a long time. How have you integrated that? Like, what does video look like as you've seen it for recording speeches for prep? Or, I mean,
it's funny. Like it moves with the technology. At first, I had them doing recordings and burning them to DVDs. Like just having just holding their own debates outside of class. And then I realized that if I had the equipment, that took the burden off of like finding it amongst their classmates. And so then I flipped the class, so there's more debates in class where I'm using that equipment.
What do you mean by flip class, Jared?
Like where the debates, the class time is for homework, which are your debates, whereas at home is time for your lectures, which is what you traditionally do in class. So we have a bunch of lectures that are recorded that are in a classroom format, and it's like basically like a video textbook for
sure. And in class, they are debating in separate rooms with the cameras, so you can kind of judge all of them at once.
Right, and they produce files and upload them to YouTube and submit those links for their assignments.
See, I think in a post-corona world, I think that can be a much bigger standard. Like everyone had to figure out, just do or die, had to figure out online education right now. Every class that's functioning had to figure this out, and so many more teachers now are being asked to record their lectures so that there can be a flipped classroom. I think the demand has been there for a long time, but there hasn't been enough of a push to do it. So I think that with this new demand, as more teams come to see it viable, I could see that being a really useful piece of the puzzle. I mean, even just the value of recording a speech and seeing it back, like it's better than, all the teams that have mirrors in their room. So the students like introverts can practice their character pops. Like if you can see your entire speech start to finish, how tremendously valuable. And I think, as you were saying before, like the bar to entry just becomes equipment. I got my setup pretty cheap. I don't know about you guys. Like, I know that the costs are going down to make this stuff realistic. Like, you can do this with a webcam and like headphone mics and some lights.
Yeah, the entry, like cost of entry is pretty low, like, but there is a fairly big difference in quality as long as like we are very aware of that. You know what I mean? I think being conscious and talking about the difference in quality and how that might influence people is something that you just got to confront. But on the other hand, it gives access to people that don't have access.
Sure. In particular, travel, right? Like they just don't have the budget to travel to tournaments.
But more than that, like we got people with disabilities, and people who are trying to get out of prison.
There's a million reasons why someone can't make it somewhere. I mean,
and so like it. I think if we think more in terms of how online debate serves an audience, and some of those audience members aren't served by debate right now, then like I think it's a very positive thing. It's not a replacement at all. Yeah.
It's not a replacement, and something that we're kind of something I was thinking about. I'm very idealistic, like the rest of us out here. One thing that's really cool is like there's even a possibility where if schools really kind of got into like developing a little space for their team to compete, there could be some like interdisciplinary help here. Like there are journalism and photography departments. There are all sorts of departments on campus that are like experts at this. So
I didn't even think about that. Yeah, that's a great idea.
If there's ways to like facilitate interdisciplinary, classroom assignments where you have debaters debating and you have photographers shooting video with good cameras, like there are just ways to kind of develop this skill of on camera either speeches or debates or just any sort of it's a different feel. It's a different feel than in a room with a judge or full of an audience.
Sure.
But nonetheless, if hundreds of people are watching, or if you're at a big tournament someday in the future, it doesn't change the fact that like you want to look professional. You want to look the same reason why we wear a suit is the same reason why you try to get your video to look as good as you can and for your audio to sound as good as you can. Like you're trying to present yourself in this way. And Jared, we're talking about, one very important thing is a debater who's got the merits down. It shouldn't matter how their camera looks, right? That we agree that like the winner should win. But there is an aspect of this kind of communication where people are looking at you and people are seeing what the screen shows. So where, post-corona, when we're not all necessarily working off of our phones, that type of stuff may be, honestly factored into an even round and like should maybe be looked at as part of the performance, just like a suit or something like that.
Well, I wanted to transition this into a little bit more into the philosophical or
Sure.
realm, where, like, I think with all the advancements in technology, a lot of people assume that we should always go faster, and I kind of have a different opinion.
What do you mean by go faster? I don't mean
that production should speed up. That content production should just exponentially increase. That we should be more efficient workers and stuff like that. And I think that like with our better technology, like we should get the reward of slowing down a little bit. You know what I mean? It's like reward ourselves by like indulging in a little bit of extra time to prepare. I mean, the difference between like 4 minutes of prep time and 24 hours or 4 days.
Yeah.
I mean, like
a week.
Like,
yeah.
I like the idea, like, because going back to what I was talking about how like it challenges some of the central tenets of debate. A lot of people win by doing trickery, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like, if you had 24 hours to look at it and talk to somebody about it and get some advice and everything like that, it wouldn't be all that impressive.
And every debater has walked out of a round and 3 to 10 minutes later been like, oh, I should have said this.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
right.
And I think, Jared, like, I don't necessarily think it's a dichotomy, right? I don't think you can either do one or the other. I don't think one is right or the other. I think, what we're really talking about is developing different skills, like yes, a debater, we want them to be in a conventional sense, quick, right off the cuff, live in the flesh, in that second to develop a response. But what we're kind of talking about is it's also good. It's also good to like have this other style where time is not necessarily the factor. The factor is your creative mindset and your process and your work ethic into listening to what someone said and developing the best case you can against it. It reminds me, I don't mean to hog the time, but I just want to, it reminds me of like how in LD or policy, how when you have year-long debates, your case kind of changes and your responses kind of change because you get attuned to what people say. Now, this is like a hyper sped up version of that, where like you kind of go into a round with your idea of what you want to do, but it may be to where in the days between rounds, in the days between speeches, you may go research a bunch of stuff and develop a bunch of disads you didn't necessarily know about until after the first speech was read. And like it's interesting to just kind of allow super in-depth response, because you're right, Jared, that sometimes it's all about just kind of getting someone off their guard and having kind of someone have an emotional response to where they can't respond very well all of a sudden. And like this does remove that. This is like going to let you record 3 or 4 times if you wanted to get your perfect speech out for the other team now to have to deal with.
I could see it happening alongside debates, though, right? So at a debate tournament, there's a separate division. So pattern D or whatever is video submissions. And it's already happening a little bit. Like I know at the middle school level, like Willie Washington, his tournaments now for the last several years have had a writing submission and have had a video submission. So for students that knew in advance they wouldn't be able to make it to the tournament, they could film their speeches and submit it, and they'd be judged against the other speeches. Like that's pretty ahead of the curve, and I could totally see that happening. I think there's so many students that are super impressive competitors and would do very well, competitively, but don't have the opportunity to make it to a tournament for any one reason.
There's so many religious holidays that fall on tournament.
Yeah.
It's like I had like people who were observing the Sabbath, and they're like, well, I can't, it's like, sorry, they like can't come on Friday. It's like, come on Saturdays. And so the flexibility, like that that flexibility, I think, fits the sort of like multiple human sort of lifestyles. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
That's why we should like indulge. You know what I mean? It's like if we have the technology that lets us slow down debates, be more contemplative. You know what I mean? Like, like reshoot them several times to work on the delivery. I think that's a good thing, man. I think we should. Yeah, I definitely want to cultivate that.
It's a good thing. Just like off the cuff responding is a good thing. Like they're both good. It's not
like,
one.
Like in chess, there's speed chess, right, where you have to do it within a certain time limit, right? Yeah. And there's open-ended, and so this is almost like open-ended. You still have to have some sort of deadline because it's a different thing, but that's why an asynchronous tournament will take anywhere between like 5 and 9 weeks to do. You know what I mean? And so you just got to constantly have people on on a schedule and moving them through and have backup plans for people drop out halfway through, what you do, stuff like that. But it's doable. I've been doing it in my class for like 5 years now.
And it's not all scary. I mean, what's so funny too is like I have a note on here where like even this microphone, we were talking about it for the thing, like use what you got, right? Like this microphone, I got this like 4 years ago for I play live music sometimes. This microphone's used for live music.
I thought that came from the Rock Band, like the Xbox game.
This probably is the exact same microphone in the Rock game, in the Rocks. I forget the name. What's the game?
Rock Band.
Guitar Hero. There
Guitar Hero.
Yeah. Anyways, my point is just like, if you have some people out there right now, you're really into tech, your audio files, you have a bunch of stuff at your house. Like this is kind of a way to enjoy that stuff too. I mean, like it's it's not for everybody, and like I said, it's minimum stuff is required. So it's all just kind of like, it's a method for us to kind of use some of these things and these tools that we develop often outside of debate, but we can use them here. And like that, these philosophical discussions like Jared's talking about, they are good discussions, and we should always flesh out the best way to handle things and the best way to accomplish the goals we set out, but don't be scared that like we're trying to usurp debate. Like that's not the goal here. And it's only a way to kind of do more debates, which is what so many of us who like to compete and judge and coach, that's the goal, is to get as many of these in as we can.
I'm interested in seeing the level of artistry in debate, sort of what asynchronous debate can do for that, because now that you can like reshoot it a number of times and get your pick and choose what the most important arguments are, really strategize, like you can. The need to speed, the need to talk really fast, I hope, like I might be wrong, but goes down. You know what I mean?
Well, I think transcription becomes another useful one. So like Jared, you and I over the course of this summer, we did an asynchronous debate of the Lincoln Douglas topic, right? Mm-hmm. Or I guess that was last year. And the ability to transcribe a speech that comes into you. So you have a literal word for word document, like flowing, that is a core element of debate right now, fundamentally shifts when you get a word-for-word transcript of what the other person said. It's not like misinterpretation or I meant to say or whatever. Like, no, these are the hard words that were said, and now you can use those to label the arguments. You can pick out with a fine-tooth comb any fallacies, any gaps in the argument, any lack of warrant, and then you can go nuts on that. So I think the downside to it is that it could make debate even more consuming than it is. Like when debaters get into it,
they also have math class. They also have science.
Like, they're really spend some time on it. Yeah. And now it's like, well, hey, I've got a week's worth of research that's going to go into this baller speech and like 3 days of production and post to make this thing like super polished. I don't think that's going to be the case right out the gate, but like interesting. I wonder if that's like where it would end up getting to where students are spending.
I'll tell you the truth. Debate, forensics community in general, like it takes a certain type of student to sign up for this. And I mean, the amount of, GPA or, units you get never equate to how much time you put in, and whatever sacrifices you choose to make is really on the student and the coach to kind of some sort of, oversight. But I wouldn't be too scared of that. And for all you debaters out there, that is a good lesson where it's like, you have other classes and you have other commitments. Like you can't like just dedicate your whole life to this if you have other commitments, but like you can dedicate all the time you can, and you get much more efficient with practice and stuff like that. You know, on one of the last notes I wanted to hit on here, this is the one thing I also have noticed about online debates. A lot of students themselves have made their own tournaments, and I think that like that's very cool, first of all, just because it's like go out there and do it. But the other side is, you know, there's a little bit of, we need to establish some legitimacy, I think, in online debate, and that requires, you know, very not strict, but like very streamlined protocols for how to do it and systems to manage it, to where it seems very, very real and very important, just like you feel at Nats. I mean, in that level of care needs to rise, and so hopefully we can create some systems that really increase the legitimacy and streamlining the process to make these things happen. And that's kind of what DebateSensei is really all about, as far as, you know, online debate.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Hey, that's our time. Catch us next week. Talk about a different subject. Okay. We'll see you later. Thank you, everyone. I'm Jared Kabika-Miller. This is Tim Seavey from Visolutions. And we got Matt Shapiro, JD.
All right. Thank you, guys.
See you next week.